If you've found your Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition combats slowing things down to a crawl in Foundry, then this video is for you. This is how you turn the slog into a spectacle with the latest edition of our ultimate DnD5e automation suite for Foundry, updated for Foundry V13 and DnD5e version 5.1. Hey everyone, this is Zephyr, and welcome to the Bailey Wiki channel, where we teach everyday DMs how to create truly amazing experiences for their players by combining art and technology. We also make modular systems and scenes for Foundry that you can use without any setup, some of which are going to be the backdrop for today's video, where we are updating our ultimate DnD5e automation suite. As shown in the demo, this makes combat absolutely gorgeous, but it also makes it incredibly fluid and easy to run. There is a good amount of upfront setup when it comes to setting all of these automation features up and using them initially, but once you have them in place, it eliminates a ton of bookkeeping. This isn't to video gamify your games in 5e on Foundry, but rather it is to streamline things. Everyone knows how to calculate their damage or how to keep track of these things, but particularly at higher levels of play, you can have a lot of things going on, and it can just get a little tedious to keep track of all of the little marks everywhere. Streamlining the combat and automating it allows you to focus on the tactics and the storytelling of combat rather than the accounting of combat. Similarly, the visual effects are a great way that may on the surface look like it's video gamifying our tabletop RPGs, but the real purpose is to increase that immersion for our players. When we're at the virtual tabletop, it's a lot harder to be as engaged and connected with the group than if we were sitting across the table from each other. So these big visual spectacles help us underline these really cool character moments and keep everything flowing and invested rather than distracted. So today we're going to go through my list for the ultimate automated D&D 5e experience in Foundry. The big three backbone modules for this are Midi-QoL, Cauldron of Plentiful Resources, and Gambit's Premades. There's also a large supporting cast of modules, both needed to make these work and also that add extra touches that really help improve the experience for you and your players at your table. If that sounds good, then come along as we dive into the Ultimate Automation Suite. We're going to be going through the module list, some initialization processes, settings, how to use these tools, and some technical demonstrations of the entire suite in action in some mock combats. As you can probably tell from the runtime, we are getting in deep to all of these subjects. So we've provided a pretty detailed list of timestamps in the video description that you can use to jump ahead and go back to the different points as you need to reference them. With all of that out of the way, let's go ahead and dive into the latest edition of the Ultimate D&D 5e Automation Suite for Foundry Virtual Tabletop. First things first, let's dive into the required and recommended or optional modules. If you've watched our previous installment of the Ultimate Automation Suite, then this spreadsheet should look pretty familiar to you. Rather than dump all of this text into the description, which just simply does not have enough room here on YouTube, we have put together this Google Sheet that has all of the modules we're using with links to them and information about them, and that's down in the description as well. And here you can see the latest Foundry version that we've tested things on and the latest version of the D&D 5e system that we've tested it on. So that's important. If these change, then you may want to reevaluate, double check the documentation on the different modules before you update. So if at some point D&D 5e updates or Foundry updates, check to see if we've tested again here. And if we have not, then check the module documentations. Relatedly, for the whole list here, we have links to the FVTT pages. So those are the regular Foundry package search pages that then also have links to the main GitHub or GitLab repositories for these modules. So that's where you can check out their documentation. Then we have some different categories here. So first off, in our required column, this is going to be one of a few different options. Right now it's required, optional, optional pick one, or optional untested. So for the required, that is, you need to install this if you want to have a similar experience to what we're showcasing here in the video today. If it's optional, all of these are going to be recommended that you pick up, but you don't necessarily have to. You don't strictly need to. For example, the D&D Beyond importer is really great, but if you don't have anything on D&D Beyond and none of your players do either, you don't need it. For the optional pick one, that you're going to pick one from the same family of things. Speaking of, that is going to be kind of the penultimate category or column here, and that's basically describing the general function of a group of modules. And for anything that is optional, pick one. You're just going to pick one from that same family. So here we've got Role Request, and you'll choose between Monk's Token Bar or Epic Rolls 5e if you want to have those features. Next we have the premium column, and that's going to tell you whether it's a free module, a premium module, or it's a premium option. Premium option means it's a free module with either a premium alternative version of it or with some additional functionality through some kind of premium means. For example, a Patreon subscription gets you some extra access on the D&D Beyond importer. Then we, of course, have the module names and then links to those VTT pages, the authors, and then the version that we have last tested with. Altogether, this is the collection of modules and their versions that have worked for us and been stable. There you go, we get that family column. And then finally, we have the description. So this is going to tell you an overview of what these different modules do and what influences there might be, and if there's any particular extra bits of information that you need to know. So for these modules that are highlighted in red, they're ones that have very important things in the description. So right here, for example, we're looking at token magic effects, and you can see over here, there is a manual link for version 0.7.0, and that is going to be directly from the GitHub. And Ada put this out, but it's not been published to the actual FoundryVTT page, so you can't get this version from the add-on module browser in Foundry just by searching it. You need to use that manual link. This should hopefully change in the very near future when that gets updated, but for right now, you kind of have to do this manual installation. And that's also true for Jack Kerouac's animated spell effects. You have to use a manual link to grab it. It hasn't been maintained in a very long time, so there's a couple different forks of modules like this that are set up to actually work in Foundry now, but you have to use these manual installation links. You can't grab it from the add-on module browser. And finally, for Monk's Token Bar, as of the recording of this video, this is not available in a public stable version for Foundry version 13. It is in kind of late stage testing, so to speak, where Monk has put out a lot of different test versions on his Discord. You can grab that if you would like to try it out right now. That's what we're using here, is one of the latest editions of the testing, but we anticipate very soon a public stable version to be out and available if you're wanting to use Monk's Token Bar for role requests. So this is everything you need to know about the module list. Check this out and go through it. There's a lot of pieces here, but I've tried to make it really nice and simple for you. If you want to have your own version of this and edit it or anything like that, then go up to the file and either make a copy or download it as your file format of choice, and then you can make all of the alterations that you want to it. Particularly helpful if you're trying to remember what options you actually decided to grab, and on any of these pick one things, what you actually chose, just for your reference in the future, or if you want to update the versions that you found are still working together, even if some have been updated, etc., then that's how you can go ahead and take care of that. So that's it for the required modules and the module list. Take a look at that and you can install all of those components, and then we're going to dive into some of the initialization process and settings next. If you are using seasons and stars, then when you first activate it, you're going to get a couple of pop-ups here. The first thing is the current date, and you can see up at the top we have a drop-down. It's going to start with the Gregorian calendar, so your standard calendar, I suppose you could say. And then when you click on the drop-down, you'll see some different options. These options are populated from the Seasons and Stars Fantasy Calendar Pack, and these are going to correspond to different D&D and fantasy settings. So here I'm going to go ahead and just use the standard kind of Forgotten Realms calendar here. and then you can set whatever date you want for everything. You can then also control all of your time advancement and everything right here from this widget. And then you'll also have this pop-up kind of letting you know about all these different pieces, and you can choose not to remind you again. While all we need for the purpose of this automation suite is the ability for Seasons and Stars to have these API calls for things to be able to track effects that have a duration that's more in hours or days rather than rounds, there's also a lot of customization you can do. As we already demonstrated, you can change the calendar system and everything like that, but you can also change a lot of display options and behaviors in the settings. That's going to be beyond the scope of this particular tutorial, but that is all available to you should you choose to use Seasons and Stars. Again, Simple Calendar is not as of yet updated for Foundry v13, but it also offers some pretty similar features, and we expect that to be true when it is updated for v13. After you've enabled all of the modules, the first thing you're going to be greeted with is the DnD5e animations warning here. And this is going to let you know that you need to have both JP2A and the Perry's sound effects modules installed and enabled. It recommends the Patreon versions, but you absolutely can use the free versions. If either one is missing, not enabled, or is the free version, it's going to give you a little exclamation point. As long as you verify that you have both of them enabled and everything, then you don't need to worry about this anymore. If you hit I understand, then it will go away for right now, but then as soon as you refresh the page or the next time you launch, it's going to pop up again. So you can hit don't show this again once you've verified that you have everything there. After acknowledging the DnD5e animations kind of warning pop-up there, it will give you an update window next. That's going to tell you all the things it's going to update in your automated animations menu. If this is a fresh install or you've never had automated animations installed, then you can go ahead and hit update, no worries. If you have used automated animations and you've customized or added things to your global menu, then you probably want to go in and make a backup. But if you're not worried about it or losing any of that progress or anything like that, then you can go ahead and hit update as well. If you close out of this without hitting update, then you can go into your game settings. And in the DnD5e animations menu, you can hit update menu and it will open the pop-up here. If you don't have anything to update, so in this case, everything has already been brought in for me, then it will tell you no updates were found. The same is true if only a few things change down the line in an update to the module, then it's only going to have you update those specific entries. It doesn't wipe everything and then redo it. You can also choose to toggle this open update menu on module update as well. The final pop-up, aside from anything for tours on your world, is going to be game settings for Vision 5e. This is just allowing you to specify the default hearing range and whether or not there's going to be a spectator mode turned on as well. I typically just leave these as default and move on, but you can customize these further if you would like. And these can also be adjusted from the configure settings for Vision 5e specifically. With modules installed, everything initialized, and any of those pop-ups addressed, it's time to go ahead and get into our settings. So first go to configure settings, and inside of core, the only thing we're really concerned about here is the open permission configuration. So this is just determining what players can and can't do. Well, I highly recommend you take a look at this if you've not really examined what all you've got for folks in a long time. The only things that we're really concerned about here are creating and deleting tokens. You need to have the create token option on if you want players to be able to summon things. And you may want them to also be able to delete things for when stuff gets dismissed, etc., but that should be largely taken care of. And again, it's worth going through this and just reevaluating what things you want players to be able to do. And it just depends upon your table as to how independent you want them and trust them to be. So take a look at this again. I also like to have the create actors on for everybody as well, and that's good enough for me. Once you have the permissions changed, then that's everything we need in core. For DnD5e, when you come in here, you generally don't need to make any adjustments, but something you might want to look at is the configure sources for the Compendia browser. This isn't necessarily super helpful right this moment, but keep this in mind for coming back to you after you have done all of your munching with D&D Beyond or brought in other content. You can use this to kind of selectively include or exclude things from the different importing systems or for leveling things up. For example, if you have a lot of the classes and subclass data that's in the SRD repeated across multiple different compendiums, you can probably exclude some of those so that they're not being grabbed. Then after that, we want to take a look at dynamic effects using active effects or DAE. And the most important thing here is we want to have this display results of inline rolls. This is on by default, but just make sure that that is in fact turned on. For Ripper's module HUD, then I would recommend taking a look at the configure tweaks. So in here, there's clean header buttons, and generally you don't need this as much anymore in V13, because you'll notice that when we hit the triple dots up here, we have all of the drop downs for things like the medkit, etc., that are being shrunk into the dots rather than all displaying over here. But this can be nice if you want to kind of shorten things. There's also an option to turn on a lower weight kind of dice tray. It's going to be similar to the dice tray module, but it's going to be a little bit more minimalist. And so if I hit confirm, you can see it's down at the bottom of it. So it's a similar look. It's not as customizable as the dice tray module itself is, but if you'd like an alternative and you just want the classic RPG sets with the advantage, disadvantage, and plus minus buttons for the math aspect, and you don't want to do any additional customizing, then this works just as well. Additionally, you can use this to globally turn on and off auto rotate for different things. So that's pretty nice there for the targeting and everything. Start macros and CSS tweaks are going to be more advanced features that are definitely outside the scope of this video, but I wanted to call this out. So that does it for the things that we basically just need to double check on, or really optional things in these tweaks. Now let's get into the real meat and potatoes of our settings, and we're going to start with Midi-QoL or Midi-QoL. So with Midi-QoL, the main thing we want to make sure of in this overarching section is the enable role automation support. This needs to be on. It is on by default, so you shouldn't have to change anything, but just confirm that it is in fact on and nothing strange happened. Then you're going to go into your workflow settings. And I would highly recommend just going to quick settings and hit full automatic. And then this will set everything to just be nice and snappy and quick for yourself. There are some options where you can make some tweaks, or you can hit full automation and then apply some of these extra bits, particularly the things about what is being revealed and what is not. But we'll go ahead and do full automation. You can see the quick settings will tell you everything that's going to change. So if you want to know how to revert this or whatever, then you can take a screenshot of this as well. You can also go back to that full manual or no automation setting, and that should undo this one-to-one. We'll go ahead and hit apply. The main things that we want to make sure are set correctly is in the GM section. For auto roll damage, you want this to either be always or damage roll needed. And same thing in player, for auto roll damage, it should either be always or damage roll needed. When you use the full automation quick setting, then GM's going to be set to always and player's going to be set to damage roll needed. So you can adjust that as desired. Then in workflow, you want to make sure for auto apply item effects that it has apply effects. You can choose which flavor of this you want. Again, that quick setting is going to have apply the effects and remove the button. You can also have the option to not show the button, which just makes it not appear like there was an effect that you could have applied. Or you can do apply the effects but leave the button, which can be useful if you're troubleshooting certain things, particularly if you're creating your own special effects or something like that, and things might not be working quite as expected, so you might want to remove the effect and then re-add it without necessarily having to redo the whole chat card and everything. From there, a lot of this is just personal preference, but the other thing we want to double check on is going to be the reaction section on whether or not we're going to be prompting for that. So just double check everything in here on what you want to have set up there. In the MISC section, probably the most important things here are exporting the Midi-QoL settings to a JSON file. This is particularly useful if you are trying to troubleshoot things and asking for help. This lets people really dive into your settings and see if there's any smoking guns for why the settings might not be working as expected. And there's also import Midi-QoL settings from a JSON file, which is particularly nice if you have a lot of different personal preference things that you have set up in here that you want to be able to preserve or move across worlds, etc. The mechanics section has a lot of useful settings, most of which are going to just depend upon how you run your table. Some things I want to call out here is going to be these options to change what kind of rolls are always rolled blind. So you can make ability checks or saves or skill checks to always be rolled blind. You can also do things like require no shield equipped for using two-handed weapons, which is really nice because it's very easy if you're switching between the two of using, say, a bastard sword one-handed and two-handed, and then taking your shield on and off. This is a nice way to help your players remember that, oh, I am actually in one-handed mode. I need to have my shield on, or I'm in two-handed mode, and I need to take my shield off in order to actually make the attacks. The most important section, though, is going to be this area that starts with fudge factor, whether you're using that or not. There's an option for the gridless grid that kind of allows you to do distance calculations when you're in gridless a little bit more efficiently. And then we have walls block range attacks and calculate cover. So here, as of right now, the only automatic cover calculating option that we have is levels auto cover. That is a premium option from Ripper, and unfortunately right now these other cover options haven't been updated for V13. We'll update the list when and if they are, or if there's alternatives that come out. But as of right now, the premium option from Ripper is kind of your only game in town for automatic cover calculation. So you want to make sure that your calculate cover is set to whatever module that you're using. And then for walls block ranged attacks, I would generally recommend keeping this on whatever cover module you are using. So in this case, levels auto cover. If you're not using levels auto cover, then I would use center plus levels, since we're recommending you to have the levels suite here. It just has a little bit more checks for verticality versus the straight up center check. So make sure those match if you're using an auto cover option. Then the next section we want to talk about is rules. So this is the final area within the Midi-QoL workflow settings. And this is, again, a lot of personal preference things for how you run your table. Probably the biggest thing is check flanking. So if you're using flanking rules in your game, then this is available to you. And there's also things about unseen and visible attackers having advantage and disadvantage, all kinds of options in here, and some house rules that are common for having all of these different pieces. So check out this tab and just review what you like to use at your table and what you would like to have direct support on. After Midi-QoL, if you're using the D&D Beyond importer, then that is the next module whose settings we want to go into. So go ahead and go up to the D&D Beyond importer. There are some general personal preference settings in the main area, but the thing we're really concerned about is core setup. So if you click on this, it's going to give you an introduction, tell you a little bit about it, kind of a mini tour, so to speak. You can hit start and it's going to take you to core settings, where you're first going to put in your Cobalt cookie. This is the tracking cookie that D&D Beyond associates with your account and has API calls for the D&D Beyond importer to be able to talk back to D&D Beyond and basically say, this is who this person is and what content do they have available. Go ahead and give me that for the download. So this is what is needed for bringing in your content from D&D Beyond. And it's also going to intelligently check things like, are you in a campaign that's been shared with you, etc., and all of that. So there's two ways to do that. You can use Mr. Premades' Chrome extension, or there is a link here that gives you a nice little graphic on manual steps for grabbing the Cobalt cookie. It's pretty straightforward. So pick your favorite method, and then you'll paste that in. And I found that when you hit check Cobalt cookie, sometimes it might not say anything initially here when you paste it in. If that happens, go ahead and hit save changes. You'll get a warning message if something's wrong. There may be 2 Cobalt cookies listed. If you're doing the manual steps, just try the other one, and then you should be able to get success here. For that, you'll go ahead and hit next, and you don't have to set a campaign or anything. This is just if you're getting shared content and everything, and you want to make sure that you actually have the campaigns particularly selected, etc. And then finally, Patreon, as we mentioned before, some modules have premium options, and this is one of them. If you are a patron of Mr. Premades, you're going to get access to some additional munching features, such as some of the class features and some generic options that you wouldn't necessarily be able to bring in otherwise. So if you are a patron, then we recommend you go ahead and go through this process. You can either have a generated key or manually link the Patreon account through the Detect Patreon status. But go ahead and take care of that if that applies to you. Similarly to the Cobalt cookie, if it doesn't automatically update or anything, then once you paste it in your key and all of that, you can go ahead and hit Save Changes and reopen and get back to this spot. And then it should tell you, your Patreon username, the tier you're at, and whether the subscription is actually valid or not. From there, then you mainly have some personal preference options. The locations is going to be where things are saved. So everything in the brackets is going to be data, and then you have all of these DDB folders, and you can adjust how you want those. If you want those to be specifically in the default D&D Beyond Images section, or if you want them to go to another location within your ecosystem in Foundry. One setting that I will call out here is convert images to WebP. I would highly recommend doing this if you have a lot of D&D Beyond content. It's going to convert things into a much smaller format and take up less space for you. So I would recommend turning that on so that you can conserve as much space as possible, particularly if you are on a hosted service where you are limited by your storage. Next up, we have compendiums. Kind of same thing. If you want to route this to different locations from the default, this is where you do it. If not, don't worry about it. Dynamic sync is a feature available to Patreon supporters of Mr. Primate that allows you to sync things back up to D&D Beyond. So if you're running your game that way, and you're not using a lot of custom items or anything like that, then you can use dynamic sync for your players to be able to keep everything linked back and forth. I personally have never used dynamic sync myself. We usually end up doing so much homebrew stuff that it just doesn't make sense for us. But this is where you go for that. And then finally, you also have proxy. This is where if you have your own proxy host storing all of your D&D Beyond data, this is where you put that information in so that the D&D Beyond importer can talk to that rather than Mr. Primate's proxy server that is serving all the data. This is a way to get some of those extra features that are normally Patreon exclusive. It's by hosting it on your own proxy server here, but that's beyond the scope of this particular video. Once all that's taken care of, go ahead and hit Save Changes, and you'll have a refresh, and you're good to go on D&D Beyond Importer. After the D&D Beyond Importer, the next thing that you want to take a look at is Gambit's Premades, and this is going to have a variety of different optional settings for you. You can use this to enable some different third-party things or have different aspects here, for example, hiding templates after they've been placed. So these are all kind of personal preference. None of these are, strictly speaking, like required in any way. I like having the hide templates on myself, but that is, again, personal preference. You can also have some things like turning on the identify restriction. So if there's a magic item, people have to have the identify spell in order to actually identify things, etc. The enable spells section actually enables the automation for these spells. By default, they're not on, so you will need to turn these on if you want to use these features. Counterspell and Silvery Barbs also have additional options attached to them if you want to have them on and have some extra effects. What I would generally recommend with all of these automations, and we'll get into this a little bit more with CPR, is to have them left off unless you know that there's a good chance they're going to come up. Counterspell and Silvery Barbs are pretty good bets in my opinion, so I'm going to go ahead and turn these on. I'm not worried about disabling or enabling them on criticals, etc., and all of these extra features. I'm good with how they work kind of out of the box as written. But you may feel differently, or you might do some of these little tweaks. But at any rate, there you go. The other thing to monitor is the timeout amount. So that's how long you have to make the choice. Generally speaking, when you have the opportunity to counterspell, it's probably not a ton of hemming and hawing over whether you're counterspelling or not. So it's got a slightly shorter reaction timeout than Midi-QoL by default. Midi-QoL has everything at 30 seconds in the workflow by default for reactions. You can either adjust these to make it consistent, or you can leave them a little bit more bespoke based upon what the effect is. But those are options available to you. Then we've got some of the things for the class features, and just like before, if you don't have something with the Witch's Hex, then you probably don't need to have that on, etc. So I would only bother turning these on if people actually are using these features. You can, of course, turn everything on, but sometimes that means these scripts are going to be running a little more than they maybe should. And so just if you want to keep things running as smoothly as absolutely possible, I would keep it to a need to run basis. You can see there's similar things here, and the generic features is probably our most important section. Opportunity attack is one of the big hallmarks of Gambit's Premades, in my opinion, and one of the things that really brought it to my attention was having things actually automated with the opportunity attacks, and it's a lot more performant, a lot snappier, and just a more satisfying experience using it in V13 and using regions as opposed to the old templates. You can also turn on things like Sentinel, Mage Slayer, and Legendary Resistance. Legendary Resistance is probably coming up for most campaigns. Sentinel and Mage Slayer, your mileage may vary, but I would turn those on if they are applicable to you. Then finally, we have enable monster features. So these are the same things on if you are going to be using these features on monsters, go ahead and turn them on here if you want that automation, or leave them off if you're either not using monsters with those features or you don't care to have the automation. After Gambits, we're going to take a look at the Cauldron of Plentiful Resources. And we will revisit some of this later on, but the important things to go over now are a lot of the more general settings that are going to matter no matter what and no matter when. Starting with general options, the main thing we want to take a look at are our permissions. So in here, the medkit configuration permissions, it's going to be player by default, and the medkit is the thing that is going to be going through and replacing everything and giving us the great automated versions of these features and spells on our character sheets. If you're worried about your players breaking things for whatever reason, then you may want to change that permission to something else. Then there's also changing things about movement event accuracy, and then choosing whether you want to disable a warning about the movement performance and how it can affect things. So those are the main things to consider here. After that, we've got options for dialogues and if you want to hide enemy names, and some UI options. These are pretty much all just pick your favorite or to your taste. Compendium options might be important to you depending upon what all you're doing. In general, these should be pointed to your D&D Beyond compendiums if you're using D&D Beyond. And they will point there by default, but you can change them if you need to. And there's also this additional compendiums section to highlight. So you can choose additional sources for pulling things in. Generally speaking, I would only use this for if I had created some custom automations, like I went in and wrote the item and effect macros and stuff for these pieces and put them into a compendium myself that is different from all of these. I would not point this anywhere else because you need this to point to something with automation. Otherwise, you're going to have a strange time. Next, we have game mechanic options. This is largely going to be kind of pick your favorites kind of things. Whether you want to have summons grouped with their owner or not, whether you want to have prompts for legendary actions on your monsters, and if there's the conjure X spells like conjure woodland creatures, etc., then whether the players select what exactly they want versus the GM choosing like, okay, you're in this location, these are the things that show up when you cast this spell. And there's a lot of other different pieces in here that you can choose to have enabled or disabled, so review that based upon how you run your table and all of those aspects. Next up, we've got module integration. So by default, these are going to be turned off except for the visual active effects buttons. And here you can basically just turn on all the things for the modules that you're using. Here we're using the automated animations, Dice So Nice, and DAE. So I have all of those turned on. A lot of those are also kind of pick your favorites in terms of colorizing things, so it's easier to differentiate from. But you can choose whether you want that or not. There's also support for epic rolls and whether the Gambit's Premades and MIDI item showcase modules, whether we're going to be pulling from homebrew and third-party content or not. So you may want to include that or only include one or the other or leave it alone entirely. Then we've got the manual roles section. So this handles some of that. Check out the optional but untested module for altering core role behavior and how to set up manual roles there as well. I've not personally tested this heavily. I just want to make you aware that this exists, and so does that module for if you want to be doing manual roles where, say, some of your players are rolling physical dice at home or whatever and then reporting the results to you, or if you're doing the same, then that setting is there for you. Then we have the character backup option. So this allows you to have some extra backups where you can create a character backup compendium, and then you can have automatic character backups where every now and then it's going to just take all of the player characters and throw them into a compendium. It's not going to get rid of them from your actor sidebar, just putting them in that compendium so that if something goes crazy or whatever, then you can bring them back and you're good to go. You can also decide to immediately make a backup of everything. So this is a handy set of features here for you, making sure that all of the player characters are kept nice and neat and in order. To round out our settings in the automation side, we want to go into auto cover if you're using the Levels automatic cover calculator. And I would suggest sticking this on library mode. This allows Midi-QoL and all of our automations to call for it, but then we're not double dipping at any point. And I also would take a look at whether or not you want the show cover message when targeting. Basically what happens is whenever you actually target something, it's going to put a chat message up that tells you whether there is cover or not, and if so, how much. And this can get a little intrusive when it just keeps popping up. And you can also make some other adjustments on whether or not you want tokens to provide cover, etc. And so take a look at those settings there. Then we want to scroll down to the MISC settings, or MIDI Item Showcase Community Settings, and turn on Elwyn Helpers. This is used for a few different feats, for example, Great Weapon Master and things like that. So go ahead and turn this on for now. It's not strictly necessary for everything, but it comes up often enough that I think it's worth going ahead and enabling. In token magic effects, you want to go through and you want to turn all of these checkboxes off except for automatically hide template elements and disable filter caching on startup. This is what I found to work 100% of the time. There is something about the way Midi-QoL, CPR, and GPS and all of our automation things handle doing these special effects on the measurement templates that can sometimes cause issues where it won't actually allow you to place a template with the token magic effects module active and with these settings different. So this is the baseline. You can then kind of experiment on if you want to go through and try out some of these settings further, but this will absolutely work 100% of the time, and it's what's used in the rest of this video and in all of our demonstrations. That's it for the need to do automation settings. From here, while you're in here, I would also suggest taking a look at a few other settings pieces. Namely, I take a look at your token HUDs and customize any of the styling, sizing, or behaviors that you want there. If you're using Seasons and Stars, or Simple Calendar, if that has come out by the time you are watching this, then go ahead and adjust your calendar as desired. And I would go through and take a look at your dice tray if you want to customize any of these icons, change their colors, add additional buttons, etc. Now's a good time for that. Same thing with Dice So Nice for your 3D dice settings and your rollable area settings. And in Carousel Combat Tracker, it's a really good time to go through and adjust the sizes and styling that you want and whether certain things will get skipped or not. So take a look there. And again, we've also got the Argon combat HUD that you might want to make adjustments to if you are using that as well. So go through and take a look at all of those optional things. Those are the things that I find myself most frequently needing to adjust or touch compared to when I install them versus a lot of other modules that I install them and I don't really have to worry about them. So just take a look at those and make adjustments to your taste. With our settings out of the way, let's go ahead and bring in our content from D&D Beyond. So if we go into our compendiums directory, there's the DDB Muncher icon here. You click on this, it's going to check all of the details that we put into the settings earlier, and then it's going to pop up here. There's some information here that you can read through and take a look at everything. The first things that we're going to do here are go into our settings and make sure we turn on the Cauldron of Plentiful Resources automation. And then everything else is kind of to your preference on if you want to have use SRD icons. And then up here at the top, this is normally disabled, this update existing things. Turn this on if you're ever refreshing things. For example, if you had a import that got stopped partway through, or if you decided to change how some of these settings are. You can also go into sources and determine what you're going to bring in, and you can include and exclude things, etc. Then we're going to go into Munch, and for all of these things, we need to do them in a specific order. We're first going to go through, though, and make sure that we have the Use Midi-QoL automation effects is turned on for our spells and our items. Then in Monsters, there's actually a sub-menu here, and we need to go into monster configuration, and we want to make sure that we have use Midi-QoL automation effects turned on as well. Another setting I want to call out here is hide monster actions. This is going to basically put the description of the actions in the secret format that your players can't see unless they are owners of the monster, so we'll hide that from the chat. So that's one piece that is fairly influential here on if you want to include that or not. If you're using completely blind roles, that doesn't really matter. However, if you are having the roles public, you may want to have the description hidden if you don't want them to see all the information about it, etc. And again, if you change your mind on this, you can go back to your settings and hit update existing things and then remunch to change that. There's also settings for your art and everything. All of these settings are kind of personal preference other than making sure we have the automation options ticked on. Adventures and encounters are going to be kind of separate pieces here that aren't really in the scope of this, but there is a way to bring in whole adventures into D&D Beyond. There's really good documentation on it from Mr. Premade, so I recommend you take a look at that if you're interested in bringing in entire adventures. But for our purposes, we're mostly interested in the spells, items, and monsters here. Now again, I said we had to do this in a specific order, and you can see here on monsters, it shouts out that you need to make sure that you have the spells imported before you do the monsters. It also is going to call out that tokens will use your default token settings. So if you have specific ways you like to have your tokens set up, in core settings, if you go to the prototype token overrides and click on configure prototype overrides, this is going to have options for the different types. Starts out at all types, and you can choose here how you want the display names and bars to be working. So you can go through here and adjust how you want these to be. Like if you want by default the artwork rotation to be locked, then you may want to have that turned on. If you don't want the auto rotate feature in V13, this is particularly nice if you're using kind of tokenizer style images or these stamps, which is what a lot of the different images from D&D Beyond are going to be using. So you may choose to do that or not here. Once you've configured that and have everything set, then per the instructions on the monster page, you want to do the spell munch first. We're basically just going to work left to right. We're going to do spells, then items, then monsters. We may not technically need to do items before monsters. I think it's good practice to just go left to right. Keeps it nice and simple. You never do anything out of order, and you always have all of those pieces just in case. When you're ready, you'll go ahead and hit the spell munch or item munch or monster munch, and we'll go in order. This may take some time, particularly if you have a lot of content on D&D Beyond, and depending upon your server infrastructure and its connections. For me, I already went ahead and imported everything, and it took me around 45 minutes to munch through all of my spells, items, and monsters. I mainly have the core 2014 rule books, so the Player's Handbook, Dungeon Master's Guide, Monster Manual, and a few supplements like Tasha's Cauldron of Everything and Xanathar's Guide and things like that. So it took me about 45 minutes myself. Just keep that in mind. You don't want to be doing these munches, especially monsters, which tends to take the most time by a long shot. You don't want to be doing that right before a game or when you need to be using this. Spells and items are substantially quicker, only a few minutes apiece, but the monsters can take a long time because there's a lot more information on them. So just be aware of that whenever you're going through this. Just be patient, and whenever you get to this, go take a break, relax, kick back. And whenever you're doing these munches, very importantly, do not close out of Foundry and don't close out of this window. There isn't a failsafe that will stop you midway, and I don't believe it continues in the background. And you may need to re-import things, and you might have to go into the settings and have the update existing things turned on in case something brought in the name of the item or actor but didn't actually bring in all of the information. It won't update that if it's just got the name in there. If it already exists, it's not going to fix it. So you want to make sure you don't cancel these things. Just give yourself time for everything to run and relax while it goes in the background. And whenever everything is finished, you'll have a bit of information down here in important details. Go ahead and click Spell Munch to demonstrate. As I said, I already went ahead and did this, but it's going to give you status updates as you go through this. And it will let you know when there is progress. It'll tell you how many it's processed and how many it has left to do on each of these things in different batches, and it will tell you when it's complete and how many things it brought in. So once it's all done, then you'll be all set. You'll see while it's parsing, it's going through a bunch of things. You'll notice that I had a few different errors up here. That is with 3D Canvas, whenever this is going through and grabbing all of my summon spells or conjure spells, it's saying, hey, there's not a 3D actor assigned to this. Don't worry about that. This is pretty much just a cosmetic error here. It's not going to have any issues if you're using these in 3D, etc. You just might need to assign a few things whenever it comes to using stuff like Summon Aberration or whatever in 3D, but there's no like major problem here. Whenever you've finished munching these, again, you're going to go spells, then items, then monsters. When you've completed munching, your D&D Beyond folder is going to have all these compendiums. And within this, if you open it up, you can see we've got monsters, and it's going to separate out the 2014 edition of rules, and they're just all together. And then for 2024, you'll have core rules and expanded rules. So you'll see that the core rules is basically the SRT and some of the main books, but then the expanded rules are going to be some of the additional source books and everything. So if you're looking for specific 2024 content, that's kind of how it's organized. If you took a look in here before you started doing the munching, all of these compendiums would be empty. You can see my classes is completely empty because I haven't done that. One thing to note about classes, subclasses, etc. is that in the past, you were able to bulk import those with the D&D Beyond importer, but as of right this second, we don't have that capability. In this character section of the Munch menu, Mr. Primate has a little bit of a letter or a disclaimer here, and this feature will return at some point, but as of right now, basically the way you get that is just when you are importing characters, it can populate into those compendiums, but you can't bulk import them as of right now. So just be aware of that and keep that in mind as you go forward here. You can still kind of backdoor your way into this by importing a bunch of different pre-built characters with all of the different classes and class options that you have, but that could also be a lot. So that is an option for you. I just want to make everyone aware. Last thing I want us to take a look at here is the tool section. So in here you have an option to set magic item prices according to the Xanathar's Guide from 2014, and it's going to go through your items and going to use those rules to set the item prices. So if you'd like to have that, or follow those rules, then you can use that option there. There isn't a option to use your own kind of list or something like that, so you can't use the sane magical item prices homebrew list for that, but this can get you kind of a starting point. There's also some options for resetting images and adjusting token frames. Then also in compendiums, as we mentioned, there is a way that they organize it where it is the rule set and then it has the creature types. You can change how you have this organized. You can instead just put it just creature type, or you can have it by challenge rating, etc., or you can have it alphabetical, all of those options. And if you want to change the organizations, you just choose the option from the dropdown, and then you use migrate, and it will go through and reorganize it. This might take a while. I personally like the way that this is organized because I don't want to have to go through and find all of the different types. Usually when I'm designing encounters or adventures, I'm going by enemy types rather than alphabet or by challenge rating. I'm looking at the kinds of enemies that I'm interested in using and then going from there. So I personally like this organization scheme, but you can change it if you would prefer. And that's everything on the GM side for the D&D Beyond importer. Now let's go ahead and dive into bringing in your player characters. For bringing in player characters, it's really easy with the D&D Beyond importer. We're in our actors directory, and I've got two kind of placeholder player characters, Gomer and Ventress. Their names don't actually matter, as we'll see in a moment. Those are going to change. So when I turn on edit mode, this D&D Beyond button shows up next to the name. If I click on that, I can then paste in this URL, which is going to just be the link to the character sheet. If you open up the character sheet on D&D Beyond, you just copy and paste the link at the top, you're good. In here, you have a few different sections here. The main place you'll start is import character and the import submenu. This you can change what all you're going to bring in. Then you've got options, and the big thing here is this experimental import features to compendiums. If you want to have that on, this is going to bring in your background, your species or race, those traits and feats to your D&D Beyond importer compendiums. Additionally, it's going to bring in your class features, no matter what level your class is. And if you're level 20, it'll bring in the actual class item itself, as well as the subclass. You can configure sources if you want to restrict certain things. So you can have things restricted just to whatever allowed sources you have in the main core settings. You can also opt to remove the 2024 spells or the 2014 spells. I personally tend to not click on either of those options because when I'm creating a character in D&D Beyond, I'm using one rule set or the other. The other one shouldn't be there anyway, and I don't want CPR to accidentally replace something or not replace something because I clicked one of these and I removed one or removed like the suffix of like legacy, etc. on here. Then finally, our last tab over here is going to be automation, and this is the important one. Use automation effects from the CPR module is going to need to be on. That's really important. And then I also go ahead and turn on the generate Midi-QoL automation effects. Theoretically, you shouldn't need this. However, there may be certain items or features or spells that CPR or GPS don't have automatic versions for, but the D&D Beyond importer community has created some using just Midi-QoL. So I like to have this on. If it exists in CPR, it's going to override this, but this is kind of just a fallback. Then you've got options up here for importing companions, which you do after you import this character. That would be if you have, say, like a Beastmaster Ranger or something like that. You have Update Beyond to push the changes back up to D&D Beyond. This is useful if you're doing syncs and everything. And then under Advanced, if a player has access to a different amount of content than you on D&D Beyond, or if they're a patron of Mr. Primate or something like that, then they can add that information here. Your information, so your Patreon subscription and your Cobalt cookie, are good for the entire game. This is just if your players have access to even more content to put on here and bring in for their character. So most of the time you're not going to need this, but it is there. Then finally, there's this help section that will give you some information. So we'll go ahead and go back to our import area and we'll hit start import. So as we can see, the name has been changed from Gomer to his full title here, Gomer Prest Newberry. And we can see that our stats have adjusted. All of our skills are filled out with the appropriate amount of proficiency. Same thing with our tools and everything else. And we've got our health, our proficiency. If we turn off edit mode, then we'll be able to see our speeds and our armor class. We've got all of our items and all of our spells. Everything is good to go. And the first thing you want to do whenever you import something is just double check really quick. We're clicking on these three dots in the top right. Then we're going to go to the CPR medkit option. And here, this is a summary. So this will let you kind of bulk update things and at a glance see what your automations are looking like. So we can see here, this has 22 automation pieces up to date. There's 0 available and 0 out of date. So up to date is there's automation and you have the best and latest version of it. Available is there's automation available and you have no automation applied. Then out of date is there's automation available, you have one applied, but it is either out of date or there's a better one. And for any of these, you can hover over that particular tab and it'll tell you what's automated and what the sources are. So here we can see that we have 19 different things automated by CPR and 3 automated by Gambits. So this is useful for just double checking that everything came in just fine. And if you want to see things individually, we can go and find them. So we look at absorb elements here, for instance, and same triple dots. We can look at CPR medkit. You'll notice that the medkit is gray, so this has no automation built into it. So there's nothing to see there. If we look at Booming Blade, we can see that the medkit icon is actually blue. If we click on that, blue means up to date. It's kind of up to date with an asterisk on it. It's up to date with a configuration available. So we have info here, which is just telling us what automation we have selected if there's multiple. And if we go to configuration, then we have some options. So a lot will have this homebrew section where you can change the damage type. So in this case, we can change it from thunder to something else. And then there's the animation section. And this is how you can change the flavor or the appearance of these particular abilities. So the default animation is going to be blue. You can change it to something like purple. And you can also choose to disable the animation entirely. So that's something to let your players know, is if they have a spell or a feature that has some automations on it, that the CPR medkit to look for the blue icon, and that means they can change it. If it's not there and they want to customize some things, then the automated animations menu is where you want to go. And this will be enabled by default because of DnD5e animations. If things are double playing or if you customize this, you might have multiple animations playing at once. So just double check that. You might want to either turn the animation off for this particular feature, whether that's on the CPR side or on the AA side, or you might want to just really heavily tweak whatever's on the AA side, but just be aware of that. And just to demonstrate what a item that is up to date but doesn't have any configuration options look like, you can see the CPR medkit icon is green. And there's nothing to do here but just select what automation you're using. So that's Gomer, all good to go. The other things you might want to do here is go in and adjust your prototype token appearance. And by default, it's going to select the same image as what you have from D&D Beyond. So this is a good time to change that so you don't realize that later and have to deal with all that. So I'm going to go ahead and update my token, and now Gomer is all set. So that's how you bring in a character, and this is great for when you are bringing people in at their initial starting level and everything. Once you get to the level up stage, there's a few ways you can handle it. The first and probably most straightforward way is to just go ahead and use Foundry's built-in level up system. This works best if you are either single-classed or they already brought the character in as multi-classed. But you can use the drop-down here and just go up a level. And then you'll have the advancement go through. There's this nice menu that's been added with the DnD5e system and in Foundry and everything. So it's really easy to level up. It should give you any features that you might have and all of those good things. Now, where there is a weak point in this is if you get to, say, a ability score improvement and you choose to select a feat. Your feats aren't going to be bulk imported with D&D Beyond right now. So you will have to import those either on like a dummy character that's just loaded up with a bunch of feats, or you're going to have to improvise a little bit. There are also feats that are included in the SRD or also in other modules and everything, so you can bring those in, no problem. It's just pulling only from your compendiums, so just be aware of that. Then your other option for leveling up is using D&D Beyond again. And with that, there's kind of two paths. One path is if you're using D&D Beyond for just all of your character needs, so you're syncing data, then everything's going to be kept track of nice and neat in both places. You don't have to worry about anything custom you created in Foundry getting overwritten or not being put up on D&D Beyond and then losing it when it comes back down. It's just a simple re-import it. All you do is you click on it and you hit Start Import. Of course, you probably want to also update D&D Beyond first, do your level up in D&D Beyond, and then import the character. Then the other path you can go is to download the character from D&D Beyond again after you've leveled up there, but you aren't necessarily keeping track of all of the items and everything in both places. Typically, I find that people will either keep track of everything in D&D Beyond and Foundry, or they're only keeping track of their inventory and everything in Foundry, and D&D Beyond just exists for level ups. In that latter case, you probably want to remove weapons, other equipment, and currency from the update targets. Otherwise, you could overwrite how much gold they have in Foundry, or their armor, or other items that they're carrying, or their weapons. So I would turn those off if you're not doing syncs. If, for whatever reason, you're usually keeping track, and there's only a few exceptions, then something you can do on any feature or item or spell is when you view the item, those same triple dots where we found the CPR medikit, up at the very top, we have the DDB Importer config. And this allows you to flag it as ignore this item when importing the character. And that is going to make it so that the item doesn't get pushed up to D&D Beyond if you're doing syncs, and it's not going to get replaced or updated or changed when you import from D&D Beyond to the same character sheet. So this kind of keeps it separate. So you could do this on individual pieces, and this might also make sense if you have configured a specific spell. Like, for example, if you've customized your Booming Blade or something on that character, then you might want to set this up to be ignored. That way it doesn't get overwritten or lost. But that's the gist there. And now we'll go ahead and do just a second demonstration here with Ventress. And same thing as before, we open it up, turn on edit mode, click D&D Beyond, paste in our URL. I would always double check that our automation settings are turned on. And I want to be importing the features to the compendium, so I'm going to keep that on as well. And we'll go ahead and hit Start Import. And here we go. We have Ventress all good to go. I'll go into my prototype token for him as well and adjust that too. So now this is all set, and you can see that Ventress here is multiclass, so he's both a warlock and a rogue, and that is represented on his sheet just fine. One note that I want to add is when we go into these compendiums, you can open up classes and you can see we've got Artificer and Rogue and Warlock here. And we have the features, including like optional features and things like that. But we don't actually have the physical class items or subclass items. In some cases, you might find that the advancement's being a little wonky, or you just want to have like the full actual copy of the class ready to go. In that case, as we mentioned before, this option to bring in all of the features, it does require a level of 20 in that particular class to bring in everything. So with that, you can either tell your characters, you can either tell your players to go ahead and do this, or you can manually make some dummy characters for this purpose, but you'll want to import some level 20 versions of the characters. So here, I'm just going to make a new player character, and I've made a level 20 artificer. It's pretty much as bare bones as I could get. And I have my experimental on, and in automation, I have both of those turned on. And now we have our level 20 artificer in here. I didn't assign any extra portrait, but the main thing here is that he's an artificer 20. And if we go into the classes, we'll see now under artificer, we have armor and artificer added in. So if you have any issues with advancements and things like that, then you might want to do this process. This is also how you could bring in these options so that your players can build out their characters with the resources you have on D&D Beyond without you needing to have a campaign going that people are shared with and paying that cost on D&D Beyond. So this is how you can do that. It is kind of a lot to bring in several of these classes because you can't just make a character that's level 200 or something that has level 20 and 10 different classes and bring them all in at once. You have to do a different character for every class and also every subclass in order to bring in all those pieces. So hopefully we'll get that bulk import feature in soon at some point, and then we can actually use those resources for fully building in Foundry. But for now, that's how you can do that. In terms of alternative methods of building in characters, you can also have your players hit create actor and then name their characters and all of those good things, and then they can adjust their ability scores with however you're handling that. And then for all of the other pieces of information on them, you can use just the regular character builder that's in here so they can select everything. And it should include pieces that you've brought in. So for example, I've got the rock gnome that I imported. So you can use all of the things that you've brought in if you were using that whole import features and class elements into compendiums here. You can also add a background. And you can see this former captive was my very slightly modified version of pirate that I used for Gomer on D&D Beyond, and that also came in. And we can also use the character wizard for adding in our class. And since we brought in the artificer through D&D Beyond, we can select that. Otherwise, you have all the options that are in your different source books that you may have. So any modules that have those classes are right there for you. And when it comes to spells, you can simply drag and drop them from the appropriate compendiums. So for example, if I just go into my legacy content and I look at my spells, I can drag and drop those in as appropriate. You can, of course, also bring them in if you imported stuff from D&D Beyond. And then when we look at these, you view the item and click the triple dots and see about the CPR medkit. And this one has an automation for using the modern rule set, but not the legacy ones. In general, with all of the different classes and features and spells, there is something for every legacy item in DnD5e. Most of the modern ones have also been done. If something you choose on the legacy rule sets says there's not an automation for it, switch to the modern rule set, it's because it's the same between the two. So go ahead and do the switch option, and then you can select the automation that you want, Cauldron Plentiful Resources. You also notice that now it's yellow because we switched the rule sets, and we can continue. And now that we have updated it, we have the CPR medkit. So that's how you update something individually. And if you want to do things en masse, you can go to the medkit for the whole character, and you can see that we have these options for updating. We've got one available, we've got two up to date, Acid Splash, which we just did, and Booming Blade because we pulled it from the DDB spells that had those automations applied to them. It's already good to go. So then we can hit update, and then it will tell us what all we updated, so bless, and now that's all set, and it also included the icon. So this is how you can kind of build characters manually and then update them and apply these automations to them. This also applies to if you have been running a game and haven't been using all of these automation options here, like you say you were using D&D Beyond and brought things in, or you were building things with the official modules and things like that, but now you want to add the automation from Midi-QoL and CPR and GPS and MISC, you can use the bulk medkit to update the entire sheet without having to rebuild it and things like that, though it may be a little bit easier if you build it from scratch. This is still absolutely there for you if you need to update an older character or sheet. Now that we've got our characters imported, let's bring in some opponents for them to face. We're going to go into our compendium packs, and instead of D&D Beyond, we have our monsters. And I'm going to go ahead and select some undead for my party to face here. We always need a lich. And then we'll grab a white and zombie to round out his horde of monsters for folks to fight. Now let's take a look at the lich and its appearance here. So we have just our standard sheet and everything. If we go into the triple dots and look at the CPR medkit, it's going to tell us that it has 15 automations that are up to date. And these are all for different spells that the lich has. It also has this actor identifier down here at the bottom. Basically, it's looking for that identifier rather than the name of the token. So it's using that to link things together, which allows you to make kind of generic versions of this, or you can make a boss that is a named lich, but as long as it has this actor identifier of lich, it's still going to cross-reference that for the automation pieces. You can also then change this identifier if you would like, and that can adjust things further. If we were to bring in something from, say, the SRD, I'm going to use the legacy one here, because I'm using the 2014 rule set. And you see, if I bring in this version of the lich, and go into our medkit, and we can see here, it's going to intelligently guess the actor identifier, and it says that it's available. So you can do this process if you're not using D&D Beyond or something like that. Then you can use this in order to go through here, and you could apply the same thing, just as we mentioned earlier. You could create your own lich that has a name to them, and you can apply the lich automation here, or you can also apply that from a module or something like that. So then if we go ahead and hit update and apply, then it should update everything that we've got. So now this lich is also all set and ready to use. I guess I want to talk about some other really helpful features that CPR has added that can be really easy to miss. So here we have the white, and there's not a specific automation identified here. But if we go into sunlight sensitivity, and we open up the medkit. So in here, there's the info. There's obviously nothing selected because there's no automations found, but then there's also this tab for generic features. And this gives you a drop-down that lets you select from a variety of different generic features for monsters. These are really common ones like pack tactics or parries, things like that. And one of those is going to be sunlight sensitivity. And this is going to give them disadvantage on attacks in the sun. You can also check this box to have assume bright light means sunlight for attack disadvantage. You may want to avoid this in certain situations where, say, the party has bright lights with torches and things like that, if you don't want to be conferring that as well. And you can then apply and confirm. And now we have automated this sunlight sensitivity. We can also do this on things like the zombie with undead fortitude. And for here, what's really cool about these is that they are truly generic. They have the names of undead fortitude, etc., but you can customize this. So you can see damage types to bypass undead fortitude. From the dropdown, radiant is grayed out because it's already been selected up here, but you can add additional damage types to bypass the undead fortitude ability here. And you can just click on the X's to remove those tags. So you could customize this, and even though something might be using the undead fortitude generic feature, you could apply this to anything, like maybe it's an elemental that has to be destroyed by a specific opposing element or a critical hit in order for it to not get the save to be able to come back up. So you can customize this very heavily and remove the radiant, etc. And you can also even remove the whole critical hits bypassing Undead Fortitude, which could be pretty nasty in some situations. But this way you can add all sorts of really powerful elements here. And you can use this when you're creating your own homebrewed creatures or modifying them in different ways. So for example, if we want to add an effect on this slam attack, we could do something like auto push for the slam. And you can see there's a dropdown for activities. So every item is going to have a description, details, and then activities that are the actual components that are being used in combat. So here you have the attack. So for this, you can change the activity and select MIDI attack, and then you're going to have the exact distance that we want here. And you can do this on if it's a failed save, or you can have it be just on hitting the target. And you can set a limit on the maximum size here. So maybe this just always happens if it hits. You can also then, of course, make it that failed save. This is also really nice when there are features that require a certain save or something like that. You just add in this auto push and it will automate that feature for you. You can also add as many of these features as you want. For example, you can add lifesteal to this particular attack. And you can choose whether this is only going to be on critical hits or something. And you can choose whether to give temporary hit points. There's all sorts of aspects in here that you can add and tweak, so you can really modify and customize your homebrewed creatures with this, which adds a really cool level of customization and a lot of tools in your toolkit. You don't need to go in and be an expert at active effects or at macros and things like that in order to be able to apply these really cool, really nice automations when you are creating your own custom adversaries for your parties. And just this selector can be a really nice sort of idea farm to give you thoughts on what kind of abilities do you want your enemies to have. So you can go through here, get some ideas, and you can add really nice, useful automation. And it's a very underrated feature here for CPR. We're not going to go more in depth on it in this particular video, but maybe we can touch on that in the future if everyone is interested. So let us know in the comments if you'd like to see us dive more into creating custom and homebrew monsters utilizing some of this tech here. Now that we've gotten some things set up, let's get into some demonstrations. So here I have this arena set up from one of our recent releases, and we're going to be testing things out on good old Eustace the Undying here, our undead minotaur with a ridiculous amount of health. And the first thing we're going to do is actually take a look at Vision 5e. So you'll notice that Gomer here, as well as Ventress, both have dark vision. And as written, once the light ends within an area, you can see beyond that, but it's in a monochrome color. So you can see here that the color is fully saturated where there's lighting, but then in these areas in between the lights, it is gray. It's that monochrome, that grayscale look. So that is Vision 5e at work right there, and it adds a nice immersive touch here. Now then, the first feature we're going to look at with the automation is going to be opportunity attacks. So we'll go ahead and put everyone in combat, and our carousel combat tracker appears up at the top. We've got more detailed videos on the subject, but in brief, you can click on the dice to roll initiative for individual characters. People can only roll the ones for characters that they own or have permissions to. You also have options to roll everybody and reset the initiatives as well. And when everything is all set, you can click on Begin Encounter. And so for our first character, we've got Gomer here. And with the Argon Combat HUD, we have all of our different options available. And we probably should have done this earlier, but we've got our Arcane Armor Guardian model to apply to ourselves. Which is going to give us some new features. So when we activate this, we get a few new abilities, and one of them is going to be these Thunder Gauntlets, which we can go ahead and drag into our slot for Argon, and then it's going to appear here. For your players, make sure that they have things equipped, and if they're missing anything in their bars, then just double check with them that they have them added here. You can also click between these little groupings to switch what weapons you're using. So if they have both a ranged layout and a melee layout, that's how you can do that. And we'll dynamically equip and unequip things as well. So technically that should have been done before combat, but we're not going to worry about it for this particular session. So here we have a couple of options. The first thing that we'll do is we will cast our Booming Blade spell and give a good punch. We have the option of what weapon we want to use, and it's going to look at what we have equipped. And again, we're going to use those Thunder Gauntlets here. And as you can see and hear, the effects are very beautiful here and just in general really neat. And if we open up our chat log, we can see everything that's been going on here. We can also see that Eustace has the Thunder Gauntlets distracted option and the Booming Blade effect attached to him. And we'll go over what these do in just a moment if you're not familiar, but these icons here are thanks to visual active effects, so it gives you little icons for everything and also allows you to remove them. So if you right click on it, it will ask you if you want to delete the effect, and you can choose yes or no, so that's nice for some manual work. That's going to be almost everything for Gomer's turn. Why don't we go ahead and back up? And here you can see the Gambit's Premades opportunity attack automation. This gives you 15 seconds to decide whether you're going to use an opportunity attack, and you can also give it a pause if you need a little bit more time to think or something like that, or you know, yes, I am going to take this attack, just what am I going to choose? And you can decide what weapon to use, whether in this case you want to use Gore or Great Axe. There's also the option to favorite the option, so it'll be the first one that pops up, and also add it to your favorites. So we'll go ahead and we'll mark the favorite for Eustace here, and then we'll go ahead and select yes on if we want to use a reaction to attack. And that's a bit unlucky. And now we also have some of the reactions options from Midi-QoL on if you want to use any of these effects from your character sheet. And in this case, nothing is relevant, so we can just close out of that. And Gomer's going to take his lumps and feel a lot more sore for it. When Gomer's done with his turn, then we can either use the next turn button on Combat Carousel, or in Argon, we have the pass option. Next up, we have Ventress, and he is a rogue that is a swashbuckler that gets the ability to use sneak attack without requiring advantage, providing the only thing within 5 feet of him is his target. So we'll go ahead and move him to the side, and then he'll use his rapier attack. And we can see we get this prompt on whether or not we want to use sneak attack in the instance that we're going to be using multiple attacks or something like that. We can choose to save it. So we'll go ahead and hit select. And we can see that we have sneak attack and the rakish audacity, which is what gives us that ability to use sneak attack whenever there's not other things near us, have applied. If we go back up to the damage card, we can see the total amount of damage, and that sneak attack was actually added to this original card rather than being separate cards. So sneak attack is working just fine. And that will do for Ventress. Knowing that Eustace has already used his attack, he's going to go ahead and back up a little bit. And he'll end his turn. Now we have Eustace, the big bad Minotaur himself, and he has two effects on him. Ventress hit him a little bit harder, and so even though his head is buzzing a little bit from Thunder Gauntlets, he's going to go ahead and close distance on Ventress here. And we'll see that Booming Blade procs, and it asks, did Eustace move willingly? And the answer to that is a resounding yes. And it's going to go ahead and roll the damage here for Booming Blade. Fortunately, not a super great hit from Gomer. But now we are in striking range for Eustace. So he's going to go ahead and take a swing at Ventress. And we'll notice that although we rolled a 20 and an 8, that we did this with disadvantage, which is an effect from the Thunder Gauntlets. Thunder Gauntlets, on a successful hit, makes that enemy have disadvantage on attacking all of your friends except for you until the start of your next turn. So Gomer has applied a little bit of distraction here to Eustace, and Eustace didn't hit quite as hard as he might have otherwise on Ventress. And just to demonstrate, we can have Eustace go through here, and we can also have Ventress take his opportunity attack. Now we can see Eustace is going to take a swing on Gomer. And this time, since Gomer is the one who delivered the distraction, Eustace does not have disadvantage. And we can see that the attack was just the 1 die. And this is a great example of just how everything works so smoothly together. We didn't have to do anything special here after we had things set up. It was all ready to go initially, and we just have to play the game. There's no extra bookkeeping or keeping track of when these things trigger needed. They just happen and apply automatically and intuitively. And there's plenty of great questions like popping up and asking, did they move willingly, and things like that, that allow you to have some extra adjudication when you need that, but it's not getting in your way. And as we established earlier, when we end the turn, then we have all of those things cleared because it's the start of Gomer's turn. So Booming Blade, if it hadn't procced already, would no longer apply. And also the distraction from Thunder Gauntlets would no longer apply. And we can also see here, as we're hovering over Eustace and Ventress, we can see what their movements were on their turn thanks to V13's kind of drag rule measurements that are going on. But Gomer doesn't have that anymore because it's been a full round, so his movement has completely reset, and we're ready to begin our next round. In this case, we'll go ahead and attempt to do some spell work. Normally we might want to have a little bit more distance, but that should be fine for this situation. And we'll use Magic Missile, and we have the option of changing our spell slots, just like you would normally. And when we cast the spell, then CPR is going to give us options for how many bolts we're going to assign. If we had multiple targets, we could choose how many we're assigned to each. In this case, we've just got poor old Eustace here, so we'll use all of them. And we can see that we have Magic Missile here, where we can refund the resources as per usual. And then as the rules as written diagnosis, it's typically you roll the die and then you apply it individually. There are some settings you could tweak if you prefer it to work the way of rolling for each bolt. But then we've applied it, and you can see that there are in fact 4 instances of the bolt applying damage to Eustace here. Not that it makes much of a dent. So again, great demonstration of just how easy it is to use these pieces once you do that setup, and it will make it a lot easier on your players. And with these HUDs, you have options for all of the standard actions and everything. It's super easy to run a combat like this. And Midi also gives you the option to undo damages if someone misclicks or something like that. So even though we have all of this great automation, it's super easy to undo misclicks and things like that. So just because you're using automation doesn't mean you are forced into all of these decisions. Just because you're using all of this great automation doesn't mean you're forced into every decision at the very first click. You can undo it very easily thanks to Midi's options for undoing damage, and also the ability to remove these active effects with visual active effects. So if you applied a special effect on somebody, you can remove that just as easily as well. So super simple here, and that's kind of our first demonstration, and we'll dive into some of those generic features and how they're working in practice in a slightly larger scale battle here in a moment. So I've set the stage here for another little mock combat. We have our white that we brought in earlier, and our zombie, and then our lich, as well as, of course, our heroes Ventress and Gomer. Now on these, I've gone ahead and on the white, I still have that sunlight sensitivity configured from the CPR generic features option. I also went in and modified life drain here so that it is using the CPR medkit as well to reduce maximum HP with the necrotic damage, and I have it set up to expire on long rest and check the saves. One thing to note on any of these activities or these effects, you can see life drain has a MIDI attack set up on it. I had to go in here in the Midi-QoL tab, and down at the bottom, I had this use other activity. It was set to none. I changed it to auto. I could also specify save. And this basically makes it so that after the attack happens, if it successfully hits, it's going to cause the save to trigger. And then the save is what is respected by that generic feature. So you may need to do some light tweaking if things aren't working exactly as you expected with a monster feature like that. It's probably because the activities aren't set up to chain each other perfectly. And that happens sometimes whenever you import these monsters and things. Sometimes those activities aren't perfectly configured. But for the most part, they work right out of the box. And so I have updated that. And then we have our zombie, and I changed the slam to a shoving slam. And we can see in the description I have it say, on a successful hit, they take bludgeoning damage and the target's pushed back 5 feet. And you can see I have the auto push option applied in these generic features. And an important note on this particular automation is you need to make sure you have the max size specified on here. Otherwise, it sometimes won't actually automatically push them. There is also the Undead Fortitude passive effect here that we were discussing earlier, and that is also set up so that crits and radiant damage will bypass it. So we'll see if we can't get that to proc as well. And with that said, let's go ahead and dive into a little demonstration combat here and see how everything is working together with these extra features. So first, if you want to pan to any of the combatants, you can click on their portraits with Combat Carousel and it will automatically move you there. And you may have noticed that this respects whatever my zoom level is. So if you have a zoom level that you like, it's not going to change that or reset that. And we'll start off here with Ventress. And I'm just hitting T to target this particular enemy. And that is a big swing and a miss. And we'll go ahead and start backing up away from this zombie. And the reason why Ventress did not take an opportunity attack here is because he has a feature called Fancy Footwork, where if he has made a melee attack against a creature, that creature can't make opportunity attacks against him for that particular turn. And then we can see that we have a prompt for legendary actions from the Lich. In this case, we're going to take it a little easy and opt to not use all of our legendary actions. We'll have Gomer come up and give this white a good punching. And this is that counterspell automation from Gambit's Premades. And we'll go ahead and opt to not counterspell a cantrip. And we will start to back up. And we'll use the white's opportunity attack to use the life drain here. And this is going to ask if the white is in sunlight. Since we said no, then it's going to go ahead and roll straight. And we can see that we didn't even hit Gomer, so although it rolled the damage, we didn't roll a save or anything like that. Now for the Lich, we have a few different options in terms of spells. We can go ahead and show off the mirror image use here. So it also gives you this really cool visual effect, and you can actually see that there are 4 versions of the Lich, and that's because Mirror Image gives you 3 illusory copies, and then of course there is a real one. Now we'll have the zombie come up, and we'll take a swing at Ventress, and let's see if we can't get this shoving slam to land. So we can see that Ventress was moved back 5 feet, and we can see that's even reflected in the pathing here. So that has been demonstrated, and he was shoved back automatically because there was a hit from the shoving slam here, and that has punted him backwards a little bit. And again, we'll keep it easy on everybody by not using those legendary actions. And we have our white, who did move willingly. And he's taken some pretty hefty damage from Booming Blade, and we'll see if he can't get a few licks in here. And again, with Argon, we can toggle between our equipment loadouts by clicking on these little boxes up above. But in this case, we're going to go ahead and use our 2 sword attacks, and in lieu of that, we're going to use Life Drain for both of those, and we'll see if we're able to connect here with Gomer. So we can see here that the white hit Gomer and then dealt 6 necrotic damage, and then Gomer passed his Constitution saving throw, and so he lost his 6 HP, but we'll see that he still has a maximum of 51, so his max health was not reduced, respecting that save. And that is not going to do it on the second attack. Ventress can come up here and take a swing with his rapier. Use his sneak attack, and we can see that the zombie is not looking good. For the sake of demonstrating the Undead Fortitude, we're going to go ahead and take another swing just to see if we can't get that to proc and do a demonstration. So now we can see that Ventress did bring the zombie down to 0 hit points, which caused the Undead Fortitude ability to proc. And we can see that the DC, which is supposed to be 5 plus the damage taken was 9. So 5 plus 9 is 14. That was added correctly. And that zombie rolled very poorly. So the zombie is, in fact, done. Now for Gomer, we'll go ahead and have him back up a bit, just so we can show the opportunity attack and maybe get the life drain to work here as well. So that's not going to do it. We'll go ahead and step back, and we will take a crack with a ranged spell on the Lich here. And I've gone ahead and prepared and added a few extra spells to Gomer for this demonstration, and we'll use Firebolt here. So here we can see that Gomer attacked with his Firebolt, and you'll see that this is showing an 18 to hit, but then the Lich's AC is 19. 17 plus 2 for partial cover from the white, which is something you can turn off if you don't want bodies or tokens to be giving partial cover anymore. You can adjust that in settings for levels auto cover and or MIDI. But in this case, we'll leave it. However, with the mirror image from Lich, he rolls a d20 whenever he is targeted, and depending upon the amount of duplicates he has to roll a 5, 8, or an 11 in order to redirect the spell to a duplicate, and then those duplicates have an AC of 10 plus his dex mod, so it's fairly low. So in this case, the Lich rolled a 20, which no matter how many duplicates he has, that's plenty to redirect it. And so then that duplicate has a lower AC, and so Gomer's Firebolt was instead a hit, and we can see that's why it changes to green here. And then we actually get a notification that the attack hit a duplicate and destroyed it. And if we zoom in, we'll also notice that the Lich is now only showing 3 images of himself. So the real one and 2 duplicates rather than the real one and 3 duplicates. So you can see just how cleanly all of these special effects are also done, and a spell that can be a little bit tricky or intense to adjudicate or remember all of the different steps for is super fast. I even had to pause and go double check all of the descriptions to make sure I was explaining everything correctly here, because there's a lot of wording on mirror image and you might not have that handy all of the time. So that is going to do it for Gomer's turn. And now we'll go ahead and use the Lich. And for the Lich's turn, let's go ahead and cast a classic Fireball here. You can see that we have this measured template, and as we hover around, it's going to dynamically show us what's targeted in the area. So you can use that to make sure that you don't hit your minion, even though a Lich probably isn't too bothered about it. And now that we'll hit both of our heroes and our dead zombie, then we'll go ahead and left click to place it and watch the show. So you can see with all the fanfare that we automatically rolled the saves for all of our targets in here. We can probably mark this zombie as defeated since he failed his Undead Fortitude earlier. And it is rolling for Ventress and Gomer, and everybody failed, unfortunately, so they all took the full damage, and we can see what their hit points were updated to, and no one is looking particularly good in this case. We can see all of the damage and the really beautiful special effects added here. You'll notice the template is still lingering, and Fireball doesn't just hang around for turns on end, but it's nice to kind of see the exact area and get that cool visual pop from it. When we end the Lich's turn, though, it has been a turn. You can see that start to fade. So now our zombie is defeated, so we can go ahead and skip him. There's also an option in Combat Carousel to skip the defeated enemies. So now we have our white, and we'll see if the white can't take a crack at somebody and actually get something to pop here. So again, we'll use our life drain a couple of times, and we'll see if we can't hit Ventress. In order to demonstrate what this looks like when someone fails the save, I've gone ahead and readjusted Ventress's hit points. So this is the same. He has 38 maximum hit points, and he's at 32 after taking 6 damage from the life drain effect here. And I'm just going to have the white attack with the life drain until we manage to get a hit with a failed save, and then I'll come back and I'll demonstrate some things there. Okay, so as you can see, the white managed to connect with Ventress and dealt 8 damage, and Ventress failed his Constitution saving throw. We can see now, that's maybe easier to see on his sheet, that his hit points have this -8 hanging out here, indicating that his max health has been lowered by 8, and he is at 24 out of 30 health. So he took the 6 damage earlier without having his max health reduced, so that scans there that we're down 6. And then when we took the 8 and were reduced by 8, then it is an even 8 off the whole board. So that is being adjudicated there correctly, nice and neatly. We don't have to remember all of these aspects and do all the bookkeeping for it. It's super simple and straightforward. So let's say now we'll just accelerate kind of to the end of our combat here, and we'll say that somehow, some way, the white was defeated and the Lich decided to leave. Although he probably could have eliminated our heroes, maybe just didn't feel like it that day. Now let's take a look at the last little piece here to life drain, and this is one of the last effects we're looking at, is it's supposed to go away on a long rest. So again, we'll look at Ventress. He has 30 maximum health, and that's been reduced by 8. If we take that long rest, then we'll notice that that has been cleared and he's back to the full 38 health points. So that's going to wrap up this little demonstration battle that we have here, and I hope that this showed to you just how effective all of these automation pieces are. And that's also going to conclude our showcase and tutorial for our ultimate DnD5e automation suite. Hope that you've enjoyed this video and seen just how easy this can make combat and keeping track of everything in Foundry. Again, Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition is not the most complex system. We don't even have to deal with things like THAC0. But there can be a lot of things to keep track of that can ultimately become more like an accounting project at times than actually role-playing. This suite of modules is designed to streamline things for you so that you and your table can focus on role-playing and the tactics of combat rather than that bookkeeping. But what do you think? Are you excited to try out the ultimate automation suite for yourself? Or is this a bit too much for you? Let us know in the comments. We'd love to hear your thoughts. This has been Zephyr with the Bailiwiki channel, and if you enjoyed this video, then subscribe to keep up with all of our latest content, and consider becoming a patron. Not only do you support the channel, but you also gain access to all of the modular systems and scenes that we've made for Foundry, including the ones used as the backdrop for today's video. Once again, this has been Zephyr. Thank you so much for watching, happy gaming, and have a good one.